tonight. We're all charged up. Let's hope we don't short circuit. Just a way of introduction so we know what happened, and it was a wonderful thing for our community. In the years shortly after the Second World War, with the many returning veterans, and there became ample employment, the Depression was over. People hadn't been able to buy goods for 6, 7 years, so there was a lot of purchasing, a lot of buying. And
introduce themselves.
Ron Farrell from Lakefield. Ross Wiles. Carol Federer from Bangor.
Marie from Lakefield. Doris McAdam from Lakefield.
Glenn Dubiel from Bancroft.
Thank you and welcome to all of you. Marie, I would like to begin by asking you a bit about your background. You are married to Glenn Fairman. Could you please start by telling us how the two of you met and how you eventually came to live in Lakefield?
Well, we met at a dance pavilion in Trent River. And then at the time he was get on someplace permanent, like he's been on the construction of the valley. And so this is, we could find her and for a whole and we got the job.
And he came first? And he came here first?
Yes.
Marie, could you hold that mic a little closer?
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Glenn came to Lakefield ahead of me, a couple of 3 years. I don't know. He boarded at Lynn and Jerry Nordy's. It was a real, she had a lot of borders there. It was great. And so it was good to get moved to Lakefield.
Thank you, Marie. That's a great start to the evening. Doris, would you please tell us about your experience? How did you come to meet Doug, and when and how did you come to live in Lakefield?
Okay, I met Doug at a dance, and we were married, and he started in Campbellford, and they moved him up here in 48.
One more question for you.
Doris, you had preconceived ideas of what it would be like to live in Lakefield. Would you
And houses looking for outhouses, because there was no plumbing, and there wasn't. That I didn't care for, but other than that, and then we got it eventually.
Ross, you made the move to Lakefield over the years 1951 to 1952. Could you please tell us a bit about your experience?
Well, if you want to take a trip down the highway with me to Slater's Corners, anybody know where Slater's Corners is? That's the first road south of the Hopkins garage. I'll show you where I dug my first post hole. I've been in the area for, well, quite a while before I started in hydro. My dad owned the farm right across from Jack and Jill Grill. And that's where my wife and I moved in 1947 into the farm. From there, after we decided we should get out on our own, and I was now working in Lakefield, we got an apartment in what was at that time Blake's Store, which is over top of you probably know where it is, just this side of the post office. We're upstairs in that building. It was owned by Beecher Blake, and Beecher's dad, I guess, owned it. There was a long front stairs from the street up to the apartment, and there was a long stairs down the back to the back of the apartment. And if you went down the back stairs, you come to a stone wall, which is part of the egg hatchery, and which is now a wool shop or something. And along the wall there were 3 outhouses. One of them was ours. If you went down the front stairs and walked across the road, to Theo Downs' house, which is sitting where the CIBC is right now, there was a pump in the front yard, and you could pump water and carry it up the stairs. So that's how I first started in Lakefield. Right behind that Theo Downs' house was the shop. That property was owned by Coils, and that's where we moved in. That was the first warehouse. And I was working for 88 cents an hour. And I only drew one paycheck. We had 2 paychecks a month. I only drew one paycheck check at 88 cents an hour, and then we got a raise to 99. And then the next raise was $1. We were making over $1 an hour. And it was worth almost as much as I am now. After, of course, that apartment, we had built a house down on the back of my dad's property, and we moved down there. And the nice part of it was when we were living at the farm, the hydro had this little shop and behind his Coils' garage, and there wasn't enough room for all the vehicles. So I was lucky enough to be able to park one of the vehicles in our front yard shop at the farm, which saved me a lot of transportation, which was a lot easier than pedaling my bicycle. In those days, you know, that if you wanted to move, you were moving from one house to another, you could borrow a hydro truck and move. I don't think you can do that anymore. The trouble with it was, I was usually asked to drive it. And so I got involved in quite a few moves around town. After they built what is now the Senior Citizens Building, it was built, and I can't give you the date that it was finished, but I know that we got moved in, and there was still a lot of work to do on the front grass. The front lawn wasn't in, and the forestry guys were busy getting that all fixed up. They were trying very hard to get it done because the Governor General was coming to a special function at the Lakefield College School. So they wanted everything cleaned up there before the Governor General came through on Saturday morning. And our boys worked. It rained, it was slush. I think they laid the sod on top of mud, but they got it. And I was out the back on the Friday, and it was my job that as the trucks come in, to get them all lined up neatly with the front bumpers all in line, all facing the road. You know, and they were all washed that night. Then Saturday morning come along, and it was raining so hard that those cars went by so fast they couldn't even see out the windshield. I don't know what else happened. After one time, pay time was the foreman or the manager or the foreman, one would come out the back and said, John, George, Harry, and hand you a paycheck. And this one day, George Watson says, Ross, I took my check, I went down to the Royal Bank and I cashed it. And then I got home, sitting down for supper, and the phone rang, and it was Roy Hassler. And Roy said to me, Ross, did you get a paycheck? I said, yeah. Well, he said, I got to take Ross Kelber's paycheck to Coburg with me. And he said, yours is the only one left here. And I said, well, I cashed the other one. So anyway, I endorsed my check and it went down for Ross. And I never heard anything from the bank, so I guess they don't check your endorsements very close. Hurricane Hazel, when it came along, I just nicely got home for supper, and the phone rang, and everybody back to work. So we back up to the shop, and we got loaded in the truck, and we didn't know where we were going. We had a whole list of stuff. started down the main street, and just as we got to what used to be a post office in the corner, there was a caution light that used to hang right in the middle of the road there. And all of a sudden, bang, it come down. The whole intersection was blocked. Lakefield was closed off. The poles on both sides had gone in. We used to do a lot of things for around town, like I'll never forget at Christmas time. One of the jobs we used to do is if some of you can remember the big Christmas trees that used to stand in front of the town hall. Well, we'd go out and get a Christmas tree. We'd take one of the pole trailers and a line truck, and we'd go and we'd cut a tree and bring it in. One year we brought one that was 50 feet tall and set up, and we had to run guys all the way across the intersection there to hold it up. They don't do that anymore either. Where do I go from here?
Thank you,
Lots of
Ross.
stories.
Thanks very much, Ross. Ronnie, could you please introduce us to your career with Hydro? We would all be very interested in hearing about how you got started with Hydro and what a typical work day would be like.
I'm more comfortable sitting down than just going to wing it. I'm a local, didn't have to move here. I was born up at Boys Camp Road. When I got hired on May the 29th of '59 here in Lakefield, through a friend that was down dead for almost 30 years.
You use the mic.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I thought I was loud enough. I usually am.
Treat it like an ice cream cone.
Well, you don't want to see that. So, anyway, so I started in the office, and I had a very hyper office supervisor. I'm not mentioning names. Everyone knows certain things. So we had a lot of fun and a lot of hard work and very, very extremely busy. We sold electrical permits to electricians, or at that time, a customer could apply for a permit and get it passed. So we also looked after power billing, that is Indusmin, Nefton, et cetera, the big customer, commercial industrial customers. And also looked after the payroll for the men that worked at the powerhouse. They were on our payroll here. Now going back to when the office was built in '57, before I retired, or before I started, and then closed it 10 years later. I was the first to be shipped out of Lakefield. They couldn't get rid of me fast enough. In September of '67, then everyone else followed to Peterborough or to Bancroft, right? By the end of '67. Now, it was very busy. Back in the early '60s, EDP, Electronic Data Processing, come in while we were in Lakefield, and it was stressful beyond belief. We worked overtime, night and day, sort of thing, because there was errors. We'd make errors. It went by ticker tape, we'd call it, from Lakefield to Belleville regional office, and it was scrutinized and sent on to head office. So apparently the computers at that time were as big as two houses. So one day I boo-booed in the format. I missed one digit or added one digit and went through Belleville. They didn't see it, so we had a call from head office. "You've screwed up the whole computers in head office." And, oh my God, I got wrecked. But anyway, so anyway, those days were very stressful, and then when we transferred to Peterborough, we had to amalgamate all of the customers and give new transformer switch numbers to our existing customers. And we built, I forget, Carl will probably elaborate too, when we're here, I'm getting ahead of myself and coming back and forth, that's me. We built Eels Lake, Anstruther, Mississauga, Beaver Gold, and Jack Lake, Chandos, Wollaston lakes. So we had a very large area. So and we were busy. We had about 6,000 customers at that time when we transferred from Lakefield to Peterborough. We had our fun times,
Remember one time where Dorothy Chappell worked in the office, she's now dead. Dolores back here knows, and Donna. Anyway, so I said something smart to her. I was standing at the counter and there was no customers around her. And she got mad at me. She was standing back at the filing desk and she had her filing folder full of papers, and she threw it at me. So the same time, played Hannah, who I can never call by first name, but just one of those people, and Mr. Hannah's me. He walked in the back door and he trucked on up to his office and said, "Well, I hope you have good fun." Well, I was, the papers are just coming down. Another time in '61, Fred and I went to Buffalo into Tonawanda just for a weekend, just to say we're over the border, blah, blah. So we went to a fun house and picked up an artificial snake, which I still have, an artificial piece of puke, which I still have, and a dog Dewey, looked very fresh and shiny. I don't have that anymore. I took spiders, and I put them in the girl's center drawer, and they opened up the drawer, and usually a customer standing at the counter, let it yell. So anyway, this dog Dewey, I thought it was a good place to put it at the back door of the office, which is now the seniors building up here. Fine. So at that time, the Roshleys lived next door in the big house that burnt. It's now rebuilt, like two-story house, and they had 2 black labs, and they frequented our lawns traditionally, you know. So anyway, they had put it on the sidewalk at the back steps. So anyway, Joe Nolan was his name. He was the caretaker, and so Hannah had been out in the service building behind, and he came in, and I overheard Clayton say to Joe, "Joe, would you go to the back door? That damn dog next door went out there and dropped something." He went out and scooped it up and never had the nerve to look for it. But apparently he buried it in the flower bed, and I never had the nerve to go after it. It looked real, believe it. It was shiny and fresh looking. It was fun. So that was my history in Lakefield, basically. Yeah, and so looking back, of course, there's days in Peterborough too. I wish the damn office would burn to the ground. Of course, you know, like I suppose any place of employment, you have bad days and good days, and the bad days you remember, and you wish, you know, it's not there anymore. You don't have to go to work anyway. But looking back, people I worked with, people who worked for, supervisors, various supervisors and management were absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough for them. And I've told them that too all along. You know, it's a real pleasure working here. And it was. And Peterborough office was very busy too. We sold permits. I sold permits in Lakefield, and Barb Heffernan and Stephen used to come often. And John Precker, Senior, was an electrician, of course, so was his son. And he was very Dutch. That's fine. So he came in one day, many times, to get a permit, and looking for Jack Hickman, who was our only customer service sales and service at that time. So anyway, he came in. Lou! Yeah? Can I help you, Jack? Is Jake in? No, I'm sorry he's not in. John, can I help you? I want him to split. Oh, customer service lady. Okay. I'm changing the service. Whose service? So. I go to the card, pick it up. Is this the customer? Yeah. And so I get directions and all that stuff. And what are you doing, John? I'm changing it from in those days it could be 20 amp, 35 amp was big, 60, it was out of the question. Anyway, changing it to 100 amp service. Kept the face straight. I got to hear somebody, he was good. He was good. So, traveling back and forth to Lakefield office, I could leave the house on County Road 18 and be there in 3 to 4 minutes.
stoplights. Peterborough, I could leave the office or home for 8:30 at 5 and 7 minutes after 8. Get on the center line, Water Street to George Street to Lansdowne Street to Monaghan Road to Crawford Drive. Very few stops. I was missing the majority of the school buses at that time, so I never wanted to be there very early. But yeah, so overall, it was great. It really was. I was very fortunate for 34 years, 3 months. So adios. Thank you.
Ron mentioned the two ladies in the back there, Dolores Payne and Donna, and an interesting little thing. Dolores, when they were in the office, I have to be writing notes to Dolores all the time, because every time I had to send something over to the office, I just put Dolores' name on it. But my wife's name was Dolores, and her name is spelled D-O-L. And Dolores' name is spelled D-E-L. So I always had to stop and think, you know, who I'm writing this to. Well, then when I retired one day at the retirement party, I said to Dolores, I said, well, Dolores, I won't have to stop and think about how to spell your name anymore. She said, well, you never did spell it right. It's I-S-L-E.
Thank you, both of you. Carl, could you please provide us with some background information on your history with Hydro and when and how you came to be located in Lakefield?
Well, I worked on construction from about 1947 to 52, and then I went west to Alberta in the oil fields and worked there for a short time, and then our company got a job in Newcomen, and I went up there and spent about a year living in a camp way out in the middle of nowhere. But after that year, I came to Lakefield, and through Gwen's effort and Ed Sutton's effort, I got a job in Lakefield. That's what it is. And then Lakefield looked pretty nice to me after a year in the Yukon.
Thank you. Len, when you first arrived in Lakefield, you stayed at Northies. We would love to hear a bit about that and the years preceding your arrival. Where did you hail from?
He didn't hear just what
Can you talk about when you first arrived in Lakefield and living at Northies?
Yeah,
Carl did.
We all lived in North.
Anyone to talk about it?
I came here in 1950, and I did board at Northies, which is a pretty good place. And I think a lot of other hydro guys did too. Then I moved to Bancroft, and I still like it there. But Lakefield is a nice place too. My kids managed to go to school in Peterborough from here, so they enjoyed it too. Thank you.
So I'd like to call upon Neil Wasson to share with us a wonderful poem about the building of the North by Ontario Hydro.
Well, I'm going to swallow this hand first. First, I would like to tell a few stories about the hydro, and then we'll have the poem. I worked on the hydro too. At least I was there, and I was not notorious. I didn't do an awful lot at the hydro, but I had a lot of fun and a lot of great memories. And I look out here, and one of the fellows who brought most of my memories home was this gentleman here by the name of Perce Calvary. And I was just a young lad, and Perce We always had a great deal of mutual respect for one another. We liked one another, but that didn't get cut you anything with purse. He would go to train me, and he was pretty firm. I got to tell you about the first pole I ever climbed. I was out there, and the first 2 or 3 days at work, they kind of babied me, and they got me on to doing this and doing that, and finally they said, well, you climb up that pole. Well, I was a little reluctant, but I had the spurs on and this, that, and the other, and first said, well, if you don't climb the pole, I'm going to kick you right in the you know where. So I looked at the pole, I looked at purse, and I thought the best alternative was to try that pole. Well, I got up it and things weren't too bad from that point on. I have such great memories of working at the Lakefield Hydro, working with Doug McAdam, Glenn Fairman, Ed Sutton, Carl Pettifer, just a lot of fun. And you can remember all the amazing things we do, and all the great power lines we went in, and the mammoth poles we climbed, and the deep holes we dug to put those poles in, and all those things. They don't mean nothing. You don't get those things carved on your tombstone or sweet nothing. What you remember is the good times you had, the good people you worked with, and the fun you had. And I never heard anybody on their deathbed say, gee, I wish I didn't have near as much fun as I did. So we had some good fun times, and I got to explain a few to you. When I worked on the hydro, the first paycheck you got, a couple of locals said, oh, the first paycheck you get, Neil, you got to take the boys up to South Beach and treat them for the night. Well, I wasn't very good at drinking, but I sure wanted to learn. And a fellow by the name of Perce Calvary and Ross Calvary went up, and we were sitting at the table, and of course, first paycheck, big spender. Of course, they told me I had to buy every round. Well, they pitched in a little bit after a while, but they showed me how to drink beer with no hand, how to do all these different things. Oh, I'd come along real good. The only thing was, I couldn't hold it. So Ross and Perce, they took me home. But my father maybe was quite notorious around there, a little reluctant to take me right up home. And we lived on Bishop Street up at the end of the street across from where Deladons lived. So they dropped me off. I was hammered. They dropped me off at Granny Winget's corner. There was a street light there, and there was a nice big post that harbored the street light. Drinking I had beer. Well, I'll tell you, that street light become one of my very dearest girlfriends in Lakefield. I hugged that son of a gun almost till daylight. And even I pass by it now, I get a little twinge in my heart. Now, Perce and Ross, they thought it was a big joke. They never did anything, but I'll tell you, the fun would have gone out of them if Ralph had caught two people. But he never knew about it. I stayed there till things got a little better and left there. I'd like to tell you another story. I worked on the service truck, and they put a guy just for experience and didn't know much. And I worked on the service truck, and the service truck, what they did is they went around and they hooked up cottages and houses and this, that, and the other. And I worked with two great guys, Carl Pettifer. Well, I worked with Doug McAdam, he and I alone on the service truck for a long time, but then I went and worked with Carl Pettifer and Glenn Fairman. And I'd be out fooling around most of the night. When I got to work, I just wasn't as spry as I might be. So we'd be driving along going to work, and they'd put me in the middle, and they had a nice big searchlight on the top. Well, at night when you were looking for a switch that was blown or something, you could turn, and there was a handle sticking down through the roof of the cab. So I'd be there and I'd doze off. Well, they'd have it all made up. They would jam on the brakes, swerve the truck, and yell, the two of them. And I'd go, woo! And I suffered brain damage. And they do that at least twice a week. And he still laughs. Look at it. And all summer, pounded in. Just a terrible thing. Thanks a lot, Carl.
Hit him over the head with the microphone.
Yeah. Now, I gotta tell you, one more story. And you mentioned boarding at George and Lillian Northeast, and Lillian was a great cook. But a lot of people also boarded at Rex and Marion Hennessy's. And they boarded at one or the other. We lived right beside Jerry Northeast, right next door to them, and I saw some of the lads that come in and boarded there. We struggled to get along with Quilla Lounge for years. We figured we're not trusting our circus to those boys. Anyhow, got to tell you about one incident we had. We were putting a line in and hooking up over in an island in Stony Lake. And Bill Johnson was the foreman for the line gang. And Bill had us out there, and it was a pretty rush job, and and I think it was about 6 or 8 of us. I know Percy was there. And Bill said, you know, fellas, you get this job done early, and we'll let you all have a swim there. And of course, all 8 of us forgot to bring our swim trunks. So we worked hard, and we were all ready to go in and swim and practice some of our intricate moves, so on and whatnot. And then Bill got thinking, I'm sure he got thinking. We finished the job, and I'm sure he got thinking, gee, Clay Hanna here's a boat comes by, and there's an awful lot of influential people on Stony Lake, and a lot of people with good connections. The boat comes by and sees 6 or 8 hydro employees skinny dipping, and that gets back to Clay Hanna. I'll be running the power line up in Moosonee. So, after us working so hard, Bill Johnson says, well, and Bill, he could pout very well when he pouted. He stepped there and, well, I don't think we're going to go in for a swim. I can't let you do that. No. So, we were quite a while accepting this, and we weren't very happy, but we realized after a while that Bill was right and we were wrong. Boy, I had a couple moves I'd like to show him. I look out in the crowd this evening, and I see John Deck. I know he worked in the hydro, and I always see that Percy guy. Every time I think of hydro, I think of Percy. I look back at the power hose. There was guys, good representation there. Jim Andrews, not Dweller's Jim, but Gene Orr's Jim, worked at the powerhouse as what we used to call them, an operator. In those days, we all thought we were kind of operators. But they were, and then there was Mary Barb Hamlin, Carl Wallace, and then a couple fellas come up here and worked for a summer or two, and Don White, who ended up marrying a Clements girl, Noreen's sister, who worked in the office, and then Bob Sinfield, he worked here. And the powerhouse had quite a few people, and they were Ontario Hydro employees, but they were a little more, they weren't in the run-of-the-mill with you, gentlemen. I say that loosely.
Another one we didn't come up with the other night, Cyril Coughlin worked.
Oh yeah, Cyril Coughlin worked there, and Cyril was a Lakefield boy. He worked there until he retired, and that's about. Oh, the other thing I should mention, we always rode, in those days, the line gang rode in the back of the truck. No seats. You found a seat wherever you could, maybe on a piece of cable wire or this, that, and that. Now they all got crew cabs, and they ride in the crew cabs. I don't even remember first that we had hard hats. Did we have hard hats then? Boy, I wish when I was in between these two guys that I had. My IQ would have improved by 20 or 30 points. Anyhow, Ontario Hydro, I don't want to monopolize things, but I do have to mention that it was such a boon to the village. Like, you take an industry that makes very few demands on the village, that presents that, and they may complain, and we never made enough money, but there was nobody starved to death that worked for Ontario Hydro, I'll tell you that. And they did pretty darn well. And when you stop to think how real estate in our village benefit, how the garages benefit, they had about 5 at least, or 6 or 7 trucks. Some garages had to put gas in those trucks. Somebody had to change the oil. Somebody had to do all those things. What that meant to the garages in Lakefield. Then they had the hardware stores. We had the, besides all the social things they did, the grocers, the doctors, the dentists, the barber shops. Like Ron Welch got his hair cut every Saturday. He never missed. He got his hair cut every Saturday, and I'd be in there. I tried to get mine cut if it was really pushing once every couple months. And here was this guy wasting his money in there. Anyway, then the other thing I got thinking about, everybody got the hydro in. Imagine the sale of refrigerators. I kid you not. Like, out goes the icebox. What do you do when the icebox goes out? You get a refrigerator. Oh, I wish I'd been selling refrigerators. Anyway, just a few things to mention. Ontario Hydro meant so much to our village and so much to our community. But the biggest thing that all you hydro people loaned to Lakefield was your personalities. Thank you.
There are a few other employees that haven't been mentioned. We have, of course, we had Glenn Fairman, Ross Wild. Rod Roddick, he was a line foreman. He is now passed too. Ron Welch was the office supervisor. Myself. Ed Sutton, he lived on, they call it Hydro Hill on Strickland Street by Carl. So, he is passed. I'm sorry?
Prospect.
Oh, Prospect, right, okay. Never been to a social church. Bud Bevan. Bud was a lineman. Turned, and then meter reader after sort of thing. He lived next door to Carl and Ann, or person Ann, am I right? Yeah. Oh, okay. And Ted Brown, apparently he worked for Ontario Hydro too. He then was employed with Lakefield Hydro, am I right? Yeah. I wasn't there then. And Ron Miller, we hoped he would be here. He lived on Strickland, and then moved to Rolleston. He was a forester, and Bert Kelly was a hydro forester. He was a foreman, maybe not all the time. All the time? And there was another Kelly, that was Jack Kelly. He was line foreman. Am I duplicating here? No? Yeah, he was lineman, yeah. And Roy Hassler, was he a stockkeeper all the time? In Lakefield and Peterborough? Okay. Okay, yeah, so he was passed for a while. He did move to Peterborough. But anyway, anybody else that should know? Go ahead.
Jack Kelly, we had 2 Jack Kellys. Pat Kelly was Patrick Kelly. And so we couldn't have 2 Jacks. So it was Pat and Jack. But Jack Kelly was the foreman on the pole gang, and me and him were 2 privileged people that rode in the front seat of the 1942 Dodge truck, stake truck. And we had long boxes built in the back for the tools, digging tools and everything. And the rest of the men all rode in the back of the truck. And Jack, I got behind the wheel, Jack got on the other side of the truck, and he carried a stick. And the stick was measured off in depths, because a stud pole had to be 5 feet in the hook ground, a 35-foot pole had to be 5'6", and 40-foot pole had to be 6 feet, there's that height. So Jack had the stick all marked off. When he got in the truck, he'd shove it through the rack into the back of the truck. Well, in the back of the truck, besides a bunch of guys that were digging holes, there were also some hand saws. And every once in a while, they saw them get off the bottom of the stick. And that went on for One day, I remember Jack stopped, he looked at the stick and it didn't feel quite right. He never said a word, he just heaved it.
The Hydro Christmas party was always an event to remember. Marie, could I ask you to tell us just a little bit about it?
Oh, they always had a nice Christmas party. And all the little ones got a big kick out of it because they used to put one of the truck things up on the roof on the truck.
Oh, the boom.
Yeah.
But,
And Santa Claus would, can you hear me? And so anyway, Santa Claus always came down from above and he'd be sitting right in front of the window and they'd all look out and they'd see Santa Claus. So that was kind of unique.
Who was Santa Claus? I sat beside him? He said so, yeah.
That's why I grew the beard.
So I'd just like to pass the mic along now and give any of you who have additional stories or memories a chance to share.
Give me a few minutes. Some stories you can't really share.
John, do you have any memories of, that you'd like to share with the group?
Well,
I'm sure you must have.
I
You
can
worked
help you
there
out
for
with
2 or
a
3
little
summers.
bit of a roast on Carl.
Carl was giving you
This is John
Yeah.
Sept. John worked on the hydro for 2 or 3 summers.
I was with the hydro from 55, 56, and 57, and before a lot of these people. I knew, most of the guys I knew are gone now. But anyway, I'd like to tell you a little story about Carl. And we called Carl Perk. And Neil, you were talking about what a hard time Carl gave you. So, Perk, it's your turn. You talked about everybody liked to go to the beach. So the beach, and most of the hydro guys were like that, myself included. And after you spent the best part of an evening at the beach, nobody was too sharp the next day at work. And it might be a hot day, and the poles, in those days some of the poles were pretty greasy. And Perk had a bad temper. I'm sure he doesn't have it anymore. But I think some of you guys know what I'm talking about, and I think Perk knows what I'm going to say. Anyway, he'd get up to the top of the pole, and something would happen. Maybe he would hit his nail with the hammer or something, and anyway, he would lose his temper, and the air would be blue for a little while. And the belt that he had on was full of tools just before this happened. And before very long, the belt was empty, and the tools were thrown in every direction of the compass. And the rest of it, do you remember this, Carl?
no, I don't remember. We're making that up.
The rest of us all really enjoyed it, because then Bert couldn't do any more work at the top of the pole. He had to come down and file on his tools. I don't know whether I should roast anybody anymore or not. Somebody mentioned Paul Ayatt, and I remember Paul. He was a happy guy. He was always whistling, and he was the truck driver for the line crew when I was there. And in the wintertime, the Ontario Hydro bought us all hot meals at noon, and Paul couldn't wait to get there. And there would always be a big feed, and the guys were all hungry. There would always be on the back burner of the stove 3 or 4 pies, each pie a different kind. And Paul couldn't take his eyes off the pies. After he'd eaten a big dinner, he would have to have a slice of each of the pies. And then all afternoon, he would be eating Tums, complaining about how uncomfortable he felt.
Was it farm people that provided?
Yes, yes, it was a farm home. Yeah. And Ross, you were the driver on the forestry truck, is that right?
No, on pole gang.
On the pole rig?
Line department.
Was it? I'd just like to say a little word about First Calvary. He should have been up at the table tonight too. I worked with Perce on some of the summers that I was doing after I'd gone back to school. And the best way to describe Perce was he was Mr. Ontario Hydro.
There's still.
There was a gentleman that lived across the road from me, and I'm sure everybody knows Clete Hanna. He pulled a few strings for me. I think he was responsible for my getting the job, and he did what he could to kind of keep an eye on this kid that lived across the road.
Where was that?
That was in Lakefield.
Yeah.
I lived on Chippewa Street.
Oh, okay.
He lived directly across the road from me. I think you're wrong, right?
Yep.
I think you were there maybe after I left.
59.
Yeah, 55, 6, and 7 was the
Oh.
3 years. And then I had 3 summers after that, after I went back to school.
So you saw the new office being built?
Yes, I did. That's where we worked.
Yeah.
And there was a temporary situation just off Queen Street at one time. I don't know what that was all about, but in behind, you remember where Barney Edwards had his barber shop?
Yeah.
Well, there was a garage back in there.
I wasn't born then.
I have another little story that I'll tell you. Like, Clayt sent me to hydro school in Niagara Falls twice, and once was for a transformer course, and once was for a transmission course. And on the transmission course, that meant towers. And I had never been up a tower in my life, and I wasn't anxious to go up there, maybe 100, 120 feet high. But anyway, the day came, and all of the rest of the guys that were there on the course had been on towers before. And everybody knows what a tower looks like. You got angle iron on 4 corners and web all the way up, and it would take me a long time to go up. And when you get there, there was instruction on how to change insulators with what they called a diving board. The diving board was a plank about 10 feet long and about 12 inches wide. And on one end it had a hook on it, and the other end it had 2 chains. And you would put the hook on the board over the conductor, slide it out, and then fasten the 2 chains to the underside of the cross arms. There was a safety line that I wasn't anxious to try. It was just a piece of rope that went around your chest underneath your arm and tied to the underside of the arms on the tower. And then there's nothing else left but to walk out on the diving board and start to change an insulator. And I don't mind telling you, I was scared. Now there's another word that you can add to that. That tells you a little closer to how I felt. And then when it came time for a coffee break, I would start to climb down the tower and using the webs on the tower, and it was a pretty slow process. The boys that had been working on the tower for quite some time had a knack where they would go on the outside of the tower, on the corner, and would put their 2 feet together in an angle and slide down the outside of the tower. They'd go down and have their coffee, and coffee would be over, and they were halfway back up the tower, and I was still going down. Coffee break's over, John. So anyway, I think I've taken up enough of your time.
If you want to try your hand at the diving board again. I got one up at my house. It doesn't make a bad tree stand.
Liz and I have a new favorite words for that board.
I just wanted to give everyone who has kids and grandchildren a chance to mention them.
I got last one.
A chance to mention your kids and grandchildren?
Kids and grandchildren. Well, you know, I just recently got married. Maureen and I were married on June the 11th. And I have 3 kids, and she has 3 kids, but not counting spouses, between children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, we have 42. So you want me to mention them all?
Okay, I have 3 children, boy, 2 girls. The boy is a veterinarian and works in Toronto. One of the girls is a teacher in Peterborough who works with handicapped children. And the other girl is she in the Bank of Nova Scotia in Bancroft. And actually, my wife died some years ago when I remarried, and we picked up 3 more children.
My daughter Linda, sitting here, and she married John Theodore, and they live in Buckhorn. They had 2 daughters, Stacy and Lindsay, and son Jamie, all in their 20s, and they have been a joy.
I have 2 daughters, Patricia and Janet. I have 5 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. So we did all right.
Thank you very much. And Neil, can we have the poem now?
I'm going to get around to this poem, but I got to tell a couple more stories. First, a few memories too. We must not forget the local hydro, and I remember very well a wonderful man, Hilliard McCracken, was in charge of the local hydro. And then in later years, he had Joe Dunford work with him, and then Joe Dunford worked with Ted Brown, who was also from Campbellford, an Ontario Hydro employee who moved to Lakefield. Jack Mose also worked for the local hydro one time and another, and he was a wonderful man too. Garnet Samus worked in the office at one time with Doris Jackman, and they, in conjunction, handled the billing for the local hydro customers. A couple of old-timers with Ontario Hydro that some of you, the names, will remember. There was a fellow came here by the name of Bud Pellicon. And Bud worked for Ontario Hydro. He came from Campbellford, I believe. He was here for a while. Then he moved, I believe, down into the United States, and I don't think he ever come back this part of the country. Another local boy, a very fine guy and a good friend of mine who worked for Ontario Hydro, was Don Henry. Don Henry transferred to Campbellford, and I believe he worked at the powerhouse in Campbellford, and he's retired in Campbellford. So there's just of a summary there. But I got to tell you a couple stories. They mentioned Paul Aya's name, and really we got to mention Paul Aya. Paul Aya, Second World War vet, came home, and he used to work with weights and that and so on, and he was really a well-built, husky guy. But in those days, he was a truck driver. And the truck drivers, believe it or not, the hydro wasn't too long changing that, but in those days, they just drove trucks. And they kept the truck full of supplies, whatever you needed in there. They were supposed to have it. If they didn't have it, there was trouble. But Paul would be out, he'd be polishing the truck. Well, in those days, those transformers were up in the pole. They didn't get up there by themselves. And there were no hoists and no hydraulic hoists and so on. We pulled them up with block and tackles, and it was hard work. And here was Paul Aya, who twice as husky as any of us, and a real specimen of a man, and we'd be out slogging away on the transformer. Paul would be over leaning on the truck, saying, hop, hop, hop. One day I said, I'll hop ya. Anyway, that was Paul. And Paul, God bless him, great guy, didn't really believe there was any point in helping us out. The other story I gotta tell you is a very true story, very funny. I think Perk might remember it. I know Glenn Fairman and Perk was there, and I think Perce was there. But we're putting in a line up around Sandy Lake, just west of Buckhorn there. And in those days, to pull out the cable, you got a farmer from the area, and he hooked onto the cable and with his horse, and they went through the woods pulling out the cable. And a fellow by the name of Max Dixon, his son is Walter, if you know Walter, he had a big white horse, or it seemed big to me, and he would pull the cable out. And I was working on the line, I was driving ground rods with a sledgehammer. Well, there's a certain knack to that, and it's a skill, and you better learn it. But I was pecking away, and Max said, look, young fella, he said, I'll show you how to do that. He said, you gotta swing loose, you gotta swing free, you gotta swing all the way through. And he hit it about 3 or 4 times. I was amazed. He said, now, he said, you try it. And he put his foot on the ground rod. Well, I took a real nice loose, free swing. I missed the ground rod, caught poor Max on the shin bone. Well, he was, he hopped around there for about 5 minutes, I kid you not. And I can't believe that I didn't break his shin bone. Oh, it pained me to see it. Anyway, so much for Max. And then he just kind of slid back into just looking after his horse and pulling the cable. Okay, I have a poem here. And it's a beautiful poem, and it's written by a very good friend of mine who's passed away by the name of Tom Junkin. I read it before at a thing, and it mentions a whole bunch of employees of Ontario Hydro in Lakefield. And I'll just take quickly to go through so you'll know who the employees are. Rod is Rod Roddick, the operation foreman. Bill is Bill Johnson, the line foreman, the guy that wouldn't let us skinny dip. Jack is Jack Kelly. He was the construction line foreman. Hannah was Clay Hannah, manager of the whole operation for Lakefield. Very good at management, ruled with an iron hand. Dot was Dorothy DeLarge. She was an office clerk, secretary. Ron was Ron Welch, supervisor and clerk of the office. Paul was Paul Iott, the hopper. And Perce was Perce Calvary. Lineman, Sutton was Ed Sutton, a working lineman and a supervisor. Fairman was Glenn Fairman, a lineman. And Bevans, as he's called in the poem, was Bud Bevan, a meter reader and a service installation representative. So here we go with the poem, and it's entitled, Wiring the Northern Lights. They were sitting around Lakefield town without a call to service, when up speaks Rod and says, by God, this waiting makes me nervous. I'll tell you chaps, I've got the maps for a job that should be done. We'll all go forth to the frozen north and compete with the midnight sun. Now Bill and Jack, get your gangs all packed. If you blunder, now you've had her. Tell all the men, we leave at 10, and don't forget the ladder. Well, you should have seen the convoy when they lined up with their gear. Hannah carried the banner, and Dot brought up the rear. Ronnie checked the store's truck and said to Paul, I fear there isn't enough extension cord to reach from there to here. Sir Percy said, oh mercy, if you want to know the truth, I plan on getting my supplies at the wine store in Maynooth. That was Percy Rumbelow from up the other side of Cohill. They drove 4 days, straight north always, 2,000 miles or so, and cold were they as they mushed their way through 20 feet of snow. The coyotes howled, the grizzlies growled at the face of the man in the moon. And then Sutton said to Fairman in bed, I wish that you were June. Then out of the snow came the Eskimo. They looked so mean and wicked. But fearless Bevan says, good heaven, I'll sell them a Legion ticket. At last they came to the top of the world, tired, hungry, sick, and cold. But they hung the first transformer on the famous northern pole. And that is why, in the northern sky, the heavens look so pleasant. Our hydro guys, they're not telling lies. They installed it all fluorescent.
That's great. Ontario Hydro employees and families have been an integral part of the Lakefield community for many, many years. Tonight you have helped us to recreate this part of Lakefield's rich history. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight and for your willingness to share your personal history with us all. Most importantly, thank you for becoming fast friends, good neighbors, and valued members of the Lakefield community since you first arrived with Ontario Hydro. Any questions from the audience before we conclude?
It's not exactly a question, but it's just a recollection as a little girl knowing nothing about hydro. And it's embedded in my mind the night of Hurricane Hazel. I was staying with my grandparents in the little green house, which is part of the offices going in towards where Foodland is. My grandparents had just built that house. And my own parents were at a funeral in Ottawa. So that night, I stood at the front window when Hurricane Hazel came and looked out absolutely terrified because one of the stores, I think it was Hudson's store perhaps that night, there was one on fire. And then a huge tree came across from Leonard's Hardware across the road. And then it was just sparks everywhere from the hydro lines. And I recall in my nightgown and my little suitcase running out the door and my grandparents running after me, and they were saying, and you gotta get back. No, those wonderful men that climb the big trees, they'll look after me and make me feel all right. I was petrified. And all I remember was these wonderful men working in the hydro in that horrible hurricane, coming around, trying to stop all the sparks, trying to get things cleared. So the next week at school, when our teacher said, would you draw a picture of something you'd like to be when you grow up? So I drew a tree or a pole with somebody hugging the pole. Sorry about that. And, well, not that pole. Only you lay claim to that one. And the man had this big cape around him. And I said to the teacher, anybody that works for the hydro is a superhero. And I still think you people did a wonderful job. And we're very lucky that Lakefield had people like you.
A little story not related to hydro. During Hurricane Hazel, our farmhouse is at the top of the hill for the gravel pits on the Bridge North Road. It's a big, solid, two-story, very high house. It shook. And it brought down one chimney, which was in the middle of the roof, and the bricks came onto both verandas. You can imagine the noise on a steel roof. The hen house roof sloped to the south like that and about a 212 pitch. And it flipped it onto the barnyard and never broke a board. Blew the barn doors off, and that was basically it. And those are the days I had to milk cows before I went to public school in the morning, by hand. But I always made sure the barn taps got a little squirt. They always sit them on the walkway, waiting for, give it to them right in the face, and they lapped it up and loved it, sort of.
Typical, this is what used to happen long time ago.
Thanks, Ronnie. Let's give them one final round of applause.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thank you, Jeannie. You did a marvelous job.
Yeah.
And this was Jeannie's suggestion initially, that we have the hydro people come and talk to us. And as I said earlier, I was a little concerned because I know they're all so shy. And of course we found out that now we know that isn't true. And it was a great lesson for us all. You notice that every person that spoke tonight said, in those days. You heard them all say, in those days. Well, I don't think I mentioned, but there's an open house at our house on Saturday afternoon from 1 to 4, just in case I didn't mention it before. But one thing I didn't say, and I meant to, was that this will be a great opportunity for you to bring with you those pictures that you think should be stowed away with our historical society. And so do that when you come and visit us on Saturday. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, I've had phone calls nearly every day, people wanting things, and one of the most recent ones, oh, I better hold this closer. One of the most recent phone calls I had was from a lady at Lang Pioneer Village. And she said something to the effect that in the very near future they're putting on a play, a historical play, related to, I think she mentioned the name Darcy McGee, who I remember had some role to play in history. I don't remember what. But anyway, she wanted me to mention that at our next meeting, which I've done. And another announcement I have, I was handed an announcement here that Mrs. Edwards with the Peterborough Historical would like to make an announcement. Dennis, I'm sorry, I thought that said Denise.
I've been called many things. Denise is not the worst of it, I can tell you. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and what a wonderful evening listening to the stories about Ontario Hydro. The timing couldn't be better because the Peterborough Historical Society is featuring a very special fundraising public debate in November of this year, the 19th of November, and the topic is going to be the referendum debate that took place in Peterborough in 1913 over whether public or private hydro should have control of this very essential service. I've heard from all the speakers what a great employer Ontario Hydro was. It was not always the prime employer on hydro in Ontario. There was quite a private industry. In fact, they were a very successful industry. Lots of debate about who best provided the public the service, the public or the private sector. Does this have a familiar ring with us today? Anyways, the debate, our newsletter, there will be advertisements in the newspaper. I do encourage all those who have an Ontario Hydro connection. I know you will enjoy the debate. You will hear lots of interesting aspects. I believe Sir Adam Beck, who was, if not the founder of Ontario Hydro, the real architect of building Ontario Hydro, may make an appearance and argue the case for public hydro. There will also be someone from the private sector who will argue the opposite, my esteemed colleague. So watch for some advertisements. It will be in the newsletter. It will be on the Peterborough Historical Society website. It's a debate, a dinner, and we will have a public lecture by one of our history professors from Trent University. It'll be a wonderful evening. It's an important fundraiser for us. It helps us with our programs, run the museum, and it's only $35, guaranteed a great time. The folks at the Princess Gardens serve up a great meal, so you'll enjoy evening, and you'll learn more about Ontario Hydro. Thank you very much.
Would you like to run a video of our night and then you could just relax that evening?
We may get some more stories to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. That was enlightening. It reminded me that I have another thing I was supposed to mention. I was given some brochures, and in this brochure, they're related to, in case you didn't know, I think you've probably heard a little bit about it. These are Heritage Days, the last couple of days, and tomorrow, and Saturday is a Heritage Day. That's why we're having an open house at 1272 Seaforth Crescent from 1 to 4. Now, Mark has some of those brochures here. Now, contained in that brochure is a list of the various events that are taking place in this immediate area, and then nearly every community has something going on over the next few days. So if anybody's interested in having a peek at them, Mark's passing them around there now. So before you leave, we have coffee. The coffee ready?
It's ready.
The coffee's ready. Last time we blew a fuse.
You got the guys that can fix it.
Well, we make it a practice to always give a present to our guest speakers and so on, and tonight we couldn't think of anything to give our guest speakers except our thanks, which has already been given. But somebody suggested we should give them some of these curly Q light bulbs. That they would appreciate those. They probably have never seen one.
10 for you.
Very first wants to say a few words with you. Say it first.
I want to tell you a couple of lies. You didn't do anything about talking about when we took over all the rural areas.
Tell us about it first.
Well, I started in 49, February the 6th. Rained every day and there was 30 below and there was 6 feet of frost. And I don't talk very much, so that's why I didn't come up here. But I can't let you go without telling you about, I worked here when we took over Peterborough rural area. And we had 6 linemen to cover the whole area, from Rice Lake to Maple Leaf, and from Lindsay to Marmora. 6 guys covered the whole area. And I don't know why it takes so many now to fix up anything. When Hurricane Hazel was through here, I left here on Saturday morning, and I never got to bed till about Tuesday. Now they wouldn't work only 8 hours, and they got to go and have a meal and sleep and everything else. I spent 3 days in the bush in Apsley area. Went up there Friday afternoon and got power on Sunday. So that's the way things used to be. The way they go now.
That didn't last that long, Bert. We've had parties that didn't last that long.
That's right. That's all I have to say. That when this area started, that was the area we had. And then Peterborough opened and they took all that south end, and then Bancroft opened and they took all the north end. So the 6 linemen we had here didn't know what to do. I wasn't ignoring these people, I'm not used to talking.
First is talking about how big the area was. Well, back not too long after I started, I spent 3 winters boarding up in the Ashley area. I spent one winter at Bill Weese's, one at Wally Lawrence's, and one over at, just north actually, anyway. And what I was doing up there was hiring a local gang, and then we were building hydro in that area. And then they gave the damn thing all to Bancroft.
A couple of things I'd like to mention, just before you go. Our photographers would like to get a picture of all ex-hydro employees, right? Up here?
Right.
Okay. And also, we have the coffee's ready, I heard, and cookies, and there's a donation box at the back there that will accept anything. It'll even take a toonie. And so, without further ado, unless someone has something to add to the party, we will declare the meeting closed.
Thanks, Derek.
Yeah.